Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of English Time with Kyle Miller. Today we have a nice program, and I realize it has been a few weeks. Hace ya un par de semanas. It has been a few weeks since I have brought you any content, and that is because I've been busy, kind of winding down, as we say, but then also taking some vacation time. So as I speak today, I am in Nova Scotia. I'm in Liverpool, Nova Scotia, my hometown. So today we're going to have a short episode, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, I think a short episode, but it will give us the chance to look at some interesting expressions today. We'll look at a few expressions, a bit of grammar, and I'm also going to tell you about the Nova Scotian Bay of Fundy. So we're going to talk about the Bay of Fundy and the town I was born in called Digby, Nova Scotia, which lies on the Bay of Fundy, Fundy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what makes it so special. Now, if you were a regular listener to my drive time show on Vaughan Radio, then you've probably heard me talking about this before. But today we will talk about a little bit about the Bay of Fundy, and I think you will find it interesting. But let's get it started. We do have a quick one, but I think a good one today as we get into it. My name is Kyle Miller, and this is English Time with Kyle Miller. All right, so we're going to start with a little bit of translation today, warming up, calentando, as we say, warming up with a bit of mixed translation. I'll give you the sentence in Spanish, and I want you to say the sentence, the equivalent, in English. So for this exercise, you can practice from home, okay, out loud. Es decir, en voz alta, ¿vale? Okay, number one. Here we go. I think we'll do 10 sentences today. We'll do 10 sentences. Okay, cuando me di cuenta del error, él ya se iba. When I noticed the mistake. Now you could say noticed or you could say realized as well. When I realized the mistake, él ya se iba, he was already leaving. Él ya se iba. He was already leaving. When I noticed the mistake, when I realized the mistake, he was already leaving. Okay, number two. A medida de que se acercaba el avión, me di cuenta de que no podía bajar las ruedas. A medida de que. Now, typically in English, for this expression, we would just say simply as. So, as in the sense of to mean at the moment that. A medida de que. As the plane was approaching. A medida que se acercaba el avión. As the plane was approaching. And notice we're always going to use the ing there. The plane was approaching. You could say as the plane approached as well. But in this case, se acercaba while it was approaching. So it's the past continuous tense. As the plane was approaching, I realized. Otra vez, me di cuenta. Darse cuenta, we say, was to realize or to notice, but in this case, realize. I realized that it couldn't, que no podía bajar las ruedas. I realized that it couldn't lower the wheels. That sounds like a problem, right? I realized that it couldn't lower the wheels. I realized it couldn't lower its wheels, sus ruedas también. Okay? As the plane was approaching, I realized. So we do have a difference between realize and notice. And I would say that To realize is a bit more processed in our brain. We can notice is like darse cuenta con los sentidos. So I noticed the light. I noticed a person, but I didn't realize who it was. I didn't realize why he was there. I noticed the smell, but I didn't realize that someone was cooking, for example. Okay? El viento soplaba cuando salí de casa. El viento soplaba cuando salí de casa. The wind soplaba. The wind was blowing when I left home. When I left home, when I left my house, cuando salí de casa. The wind was blowing when I left home. So yes, we say the wind was blowing, soplaba. So in these examples, we're seeing the past continuous tense. So we're seeing the wind was blowing, and we typically use this when we have an action that is, well, continuing in the past, and it's typically being interrupted by an action, a momentary action. Okay? So the wind was blowing when I left home, cuando salí de casa. At that moment, the wind was blowing, soplaba, you would say in Spanish. Okay? Estaba reparando el televisor cuando me lo contaron. Estaba reparando el televisor cuando me lo contaron. I was repairing the TV when they told me about it. Cuando me lo contaron. When they told me about it. Yeah. Okay. Justo cuando empezábamos a acostumbrarnos a las cosas, nos trasladaron a otro país. Justo cuando. Just when. We were starting to get used to things. So acostumbrarnos, acostumbrarse, to get used to, right? To get used to things, to get used to, más sustantivo, las cosas, en este caso, or it can be followed by the noun or the ing, the gerund noun, okay? Just when they were starting to get used to things, or we were starting to get used to things, they transferred us to another country. They transferred us. So they transferred us. This moment occurred in this period as we were starting to get used to things. Okay, creía que ibas a venir en tren. I thought you were going to come by train. Que ibas a venir en tren. I thought you were going to come by train. By train. So we don't say in train. We would say to come by train. I thought you were going to come by train. Cuando llegamos, la gente estaba desayunando. When we arrived, the people were having breakfast. When we arrived, the people, la gente, the people were having breakfast, desayunando. So remember, in English, las comidas, we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and we use the verb to have. We don't say we were lunching. No, we say we were having lunch. They were having breakfast. I was having lunch. My friend was having dinner. When we arrived, the people were having breakfast. Okay? Íbamos perdiendo cuando empezó la tormenta. We were losing. Íbamos perdiendo el partido. Por ejemplo, we were losing when the storm broke out. So that's a phrasal verb. Cuando empezó, con una tormenta, we could say to break out. We use this phrasal verb also with things like wars. The war broke out. My grandfather was in Europe when the war broke out. We were losing the game when the storm broke out. So certain things, we use this idea for something to begin or to manifest, to start to happen. We can use this phrasal verb to break out. So we've done 9, so I think it's kind of crazy to stop at 9. Let's do one more. Okay. Estaba marcando tu número cuando entraste. I was dialing your number when you walked in. Cuando entraste. I was dialing your number. So marcando en el teléfono, to dial. I was dialing your number when you walked in, or when you came in, cuando entraste. Yeah, I was dialing your number when you came in, or when you walked in. So again, we could modify the verb to mean entering by car, you drove in. Entering by plane, you flew in to the city. Entering by, walking, walked in. And cuando entraste, in this case, entraste andando, when you walked in. Okay? Anyway, so a little bit of a warm up there with some translation. Later on in the program, we'll do a little bit more, but we'll look at some expressions also through translation. But now, I know today's show will be a short one, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about where I am, which is in Nova Scotia. And in Anglo-Saxon culture, I find that people say that they are from the place, not the place necessarily where they were born, but the place where they spent the majority of their youth, of their childhood. So I am from a town called Liverpool, Nova Scotia, on the east coast of Canada, north of Boston and New York in the New England states. And the town is called Liverpool, and I say I'm from there because I grew up there. I grew up here. I'm saying here because I'm standing here now in this town. But I wasn't born here. Whereas I think in Spanish you would often say, I'm from, and you would list the town that you were born in, I think. But I would say in our culture, we typically say we are from the place where we spent most of our youth. So I'm from a town called Liverpool, but I was born in another town called Digby. Now, Digby sits in this same province of Nova Scotia on a bay, una bahía, called the Bay of Fundy. So we can look at a little bit of vocabulary here. We have the word bay, bahía. We're also going to talk about the tides, las mareas, y el puerto, we could say the port, or the harbor, Harbour, in British English or Canadian English as well. In American English, they would spell it without the U, harbor. La costa, o lo que se llama el litoral, a lo mejor, the coastline. Okay? And we also will talk about seafood, marisco, seafood, langosta, lobster, un pescador, a fisherman or a fisher, sometimes they say now. Okay? And the Bay of Fundy is famous for its tides. Es una bahía famoso por sus mareas. It is famous for its tides. And it's a very interesting place in Atlantic Canada, located between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Famous around the world for its tides, for the highest or the greatest tidal differential in the world. Now, most people know that the ocean, of course, rises, el mar, que sube, it rises and falls every day with the tides, las mareas, but the Bay of Fundy really takes that to another level. In some places, the difference between the high tide and the low tide is more than 16 meters. More than 16 meters, which is like a 4 or 5 floor building. So if you've never seen it before, it's hard to believe. At high tide, boats are floating in the harbor, as they normally would. And a few hours later, the water has disappeared and those same boats can be sitting on the seabed. On the ocean, what was the ocean floor. And then about 6 hours after that, the water comes back and the boats have lifted and the boats are floating again. So why are the tides so big in the Bay of Fundy? Well, it seems it's mostly because of the shape of the bay itself. The Bay of Fundy is long and quite narrow. Es bastante largo y estrecho. Long and narrow, almost like a giant funnel, un embudo. And as the Atlantic Ocean pushes water into the bay, the water is forced into a smaller space, so it rises much higher than it does in most other parts of the world. Now, the moon's gravity, of course, is responsible for the tides, but the shape of the bay, in this case, makes these tides much more dramatic, let's say. And the tides affect almost everything in the region, especially the fishing industry. Fishing has become a very important part of life here for hundreds of years. Nova Scotia is famous for its lobster. But fishermen in the area also catch scallops, right? Vieira, scallops, clams, almejas, herring, which is a type of white fish, and other kinds of seafood. Now, working on the Bay of Fundy means paying very close attention to the tides every single day. Fishermen plan when they leave the harbor and when they return because the water level changes dramatically. And in some small harbors, a boat simply can't move if the tide is too low. Now, the bay is also rich in marine life, and this moving water, of course, is constantly mixing different nutrients through the ocean, creating an excellent environment for fish and other sea animals. And this is one of the reasons why whales visit this water every summer. People go whale watching in the Bay of Fundy. And depending on the season, you might see humpback whales, minke whales, seals, porpoises, a lot of different marine life. Bird watchers also come from around the world because thousands of different types of migratory birds, or thousands of different birds, I should say, stop there during the year. And tourism is another important part of the local economy. Visitors come to experience these tides, as I have done. One of the most popular things to do is walk on the ocean floor during the low tide. And a few hours later, the same place is covered by several meters of seawater. And I've mentioned before the tidal power generation going on in the Bay of Fundy, as they're trying to harness, they're trying to control, or trying to, I suppose, take advantage of the powerful movement of the tides. And they put generators into the Bay of Fundy years ago. And when they first did it, the first tide came in and completely destroyed these turbine generators because they had underestimated the power of the tide. And now they're experimenting with different versions. I don't know exactly where they are with that now, but it's something that they're working on and trying to harness, as we say, this power. But the Bay of Fundy has also shaped the coastline over thousands of years. These tides have created cliffs and caves and interesting rock formations. And you can go to interesting national parks or provincial parks in Nova Scotia and the province of New Brunswick as well that are on the bay, and you can see the interesting rock formations that have formed. And for me, it's one of those places that reminds you of the power of nature and the landscape and the wildlife, how it has adapted to that particular environment. So if you ever visit Nova Scotia, I'd definitely recommend spending a day on the Bay of Fundy and check for the tide schedule before you go, as you might expect to see high tide and see a lot of water, but you might find it to be low tide and it could be dry. But it's an interesting place, and so I was born in the town of Digby, which is on the Bay of Fundy, in a beautiful little town, also famous for its seafood, for its clams especially, and a beautiful part of the world. So anyway, a little bit about the Bay of Fundy today. I don't know if I will go. I'm in Nova Scotia now. I may or may not go to visit the Bay of Fundy on this trip, but regardless, it is something that I think is kind of interesting, worth learning about, and worth exploring in today's topic. All right, now at the start of the show, at the start of our session today, I talked about expressions. I said we would look at 5 expressions, so let's do that a bit through translation. Okay, so I'll give you a few sentences. Now, some of these, you could call them expressions or just interesting, maybe idioms, or just simple parts of speech that I think we could call an expression. The first one, tarde o temprano. Tarde o temprano. And imagine this sentence. Tarde o temprano, te arrepentirás de haberlo hecho. Tarde o temprano, we can say sooner or later. Sooner or later, you'll regret having done it. Te arrepentirás de haberlo hecho. You'll regret having done it. You'll regret having done it. But sooner or later. So it's kind of like saying eventually, but it's like saying if you are persistent enough, if you continue, at some point, this result will happen. If you study English, sooner or later, you'll see good results. Maybe some people think if you buy enough lottery tickets, sooner or later, you'll win. But that's certainly not always the case. Okay, let's do another one. El proyecto empezó con buen pie. The project got off to a good start. It got off to a good start. So we could say it got off on the right foot, but it's more common to say it got off to a good start. It got off, con mal pie, it got off to a bad start. But in this case, the project, y fíjate, project, no es proyect, but project got off to a good start. Be careful with the prepositions there. And the article, it got off to a good start. Okay? Okay, tenemos que recurrir a financiación ajena. We have to resort to, recurrir a. We have to resort to outside financing, financiación ajena. We have to resort to outside financing. Recurrir a. Ayuda de nuestros amigos. We have to resort to help from our friends. We say to resort to something. Okay, that was number 3. Number 4. Tengo algunos cabos sueltos que atar primero. I have some loose ends. I have to tie some loose ends first. Cabos sueltos, we can say loose ends. Loose ends. So when you say cabos sueltos, in this case, we mean, individual tasks, odd tasks. Que atar. So I have to tie some loose ends first. Okay? Toda empresa tiene sus altibajos. Every company has sus altibajos, its ups and downs. Yeah, every company has its ups and downs, sus altibajos, its ups and downs. We pluralize these. It has its ups and downs. This job has its ups and downs. Living in Madrid has its ups and downs, right? It has a lot of great things, but it's a bit too hot in the summer. So it has its ups and downs, for example. Okay, so I've given you 5 expressions. I think that was kind of interesting. We also practiced earlier on in the show, we practiced some sentences using the past continuous tense. And we also learned a little bit about an interesting part of Atlantic Canada, the Bay of Fundy, today on the show. So I am going to finish, and I'll be back again soon with another episode. It might be a few weeks as I am on vacation. I may or may not put out an episode next week, but stay tuned because there is more coming, and I'll be back soon. Enjoy this summer. I hope you enjoy the time with your family and friends, and you can always reach me, Kyle, at theenglishcollective.com, or you can also reach me on Instagram and Twitter, or X as they call it. I'm Kyle Miller, Millar. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.